Good morning, this is Stephanie Kitchens at Hightower Stitching with today's tutorial about string quilting. This tutorial is using fabric strips that are 1 inch in width to make pot holders and table savers. Here are two products that I used to make the pot holders and table savers. The first one is the Insulbright to go inside the pot holders. And the other product was the silver fabric quilted material that you use on your ironing board. And you use that on the back of the table savers. The other materials that I used were muslin and scrap materials for the inside. I used that around the Insulbright or on the back of the pot holders before I added the silver to the back, the silver fabric. Then I have some strips of dark fabrics. These are 1 inchers that I cut. Every time I finish a project, I'd cut one or two rows off. And then I have some light ones, and those are 1 inch. And then you're going to need, I did like crazy squares, so these are going to be the center. And usually a dark works really well in the center. You'll see as we go through it. And then the last thing you're going to need is binding. You're going to need a piece of backing fabric if you're not using the silver on the back, the silver fabric. And then you take and use some of that thread that's gotten older and you're not going to use, or the bobbins that you have too many bobbins, you need to get some of them emptied. There's another great project for that. And that's the fun thing about this project. It's make small projects. You use up scraps, thread, bobbin thread, smaller pieces of fabric. It's pretty quick, and then it's fun to share when you get finished. And some of them even can be coffee mug rugs, and then you've got your pot holders and then your table savers. And now I've moved into the kitchen where my sewing machine is. I have boxes of strips. I have darks that I've cut, and then I've got 1 inch light colors, and I've got those separated. And what I'm going to do is I use a piece of muslin on the front and the back, and then of the Insulbright, because I'm going to do a pot holder, I take and cut out a crazy shape for the center, and I pick a strip, and I've already picked a strip, and I'm going to take and lay it down to cover one of the sides. Then take and stitch it. I usually set the machine at a small stitch and just go across. Alright, and then before you cut it off, open it up, because invariably I was cutting them the wrong way and I would be short. And so there would be one. It's easy to finger press it, turn it. Whatever you do, don't let your iron touch that Insulbright. And I even found with the silver backing fabric, quilted fabric, don't do it there either, because you have to clean it off when you get finished. And so I have to make up the baking powder paste and work with it. And then I'm going to take the second strip and I'm going to lay it, I'm going clockwise and make sure it covers everything. I'm going to start at the very end, well, almost the end. Stitch, and then stop right there at the edge, flip it down, and this is getting pretty self-explanatory. So then I've got another one that I picked, so I go to the third side, make sure you got everything covered, run your stitch, see, I about did it again. Fold it out and cut it off. Now, let's say for accent you want to have a narrow strip. You can take that 1 inch strip and then just cut it down, or you can sew it on. And this would probably have really been a dark strip instead of a light strip, but you'll get the idea. and stop. And the reason I'd like to use the muslin on both sides, it just feels good. That's one thing. But then, when you're sewing on the back, I have all these little eyelashes, and you'd have all these little cut-off places. So it's going to look a lot better when you put a solid piece on the back, all right? So now, let's say, and so this one we were back to talking about this. I'm just going to cut off a strip. And now it's going to be a narrow strip. And so when you come back around, that one will be narrower, and that'll look good. All right, so we've got this done all the way to the outside edge, and it's going to be wonky around the edge. But right now, figure out what you want to put on the back. Pick a fabric that you like, and then lay it on there. And what I did to connect them at this point was to stitch in the ditch. And if you go slow and you watch what you're doing, you can just drop your needle and then very sort of creep along, a little creepier than that. Then you can turn and you can go another direction. And you can just hook down a few of them any way you want and then run it off. Run it off the edge. And at that point, you'd have it, and your back would have a nice finish to it. And then you take your binding and put that around the edge. And when you get finished, here is an example of a potholder, and I put a little loop on it. And I did stitch in the ditch. Here's one that has the silver on the back, 'cause this is going to be a table saver. And this one I didn't put a crazy center in it. I just did my strips. And you can get pretty creative with that. And then my biggest one so far, a bigger one, and that had the silver on it. And this was a table saver when they use a larger pot. And this was a 13 by 8.5. And this is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching. I hope you enjoy this tutorial.